Hi guys, my name's Barry and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at the top 10 best openings of all time in horror movies. Now this list is almost impossible to determine because there's so many horror movies out there. There's so many horror movies with really good openings. Some you may not consider a great opening in my list, and some of your opinions might not be great for me. So as always, guys, this list is just opinion based. It's not factual. It's not a fact based top 10. It's just a top 10 list of horror openings that I always love, I always go back to with great fondness, and they had a massive impact on not just myself, but on the film itself. Squeezing in at number 10 is It from 2017. Now, we'd all seen the original It miniseries from back in 1990, and most of us, or a lot of us, have read the book, so we knew what to expect in the film. But because the film was made in 2017, I genuinely wasn't expecting to see what I did in the movie, because they in a lot of horror films, they blank out a lot of kid deaths, and when a kid does die in a film, a lot of the time you don't really see it on screen. Sometimes you see the aftermath of it, but in this one, with the build-up of Pennywise speaking to Georgie at the beginning, it's something that I felt kind of tingly when I was watching it, because I knew what was going to happen, but I wasn't expecting to see what I did. And then when he got his arm ripped off and you see him crawling away, you felt genuinely terrified and sorry for Georgie, and that was the opening to the film, and I was completely blown away. And at number 9 is It Follows. Something great and unique about It Follows was I didn't know what to expect at all. And even when we saw the beginning of the film, I was scratching my head thinking, what is actually happening here? I don't know what this girl is running away from. I don't know what actually killed this girl on the beach. I don't know why she's scared. What is she looking at? I genuinely had no idea. It's only after watching it a couple of times made me appreciate the beginning of the movie more. When you watch the film for the first time, and you watch the opening's not special whatsoever. I wouldn't put it in my top 10 if I probably only seen it once. But because I've seen it multiple times, and because I found out what it was that she was scared of, then that's what made the opening terrifying. When we look back and see that she's looking at nothing in the distance, because we know what she's actually looking at makes it scarier. And I'm glad that they didn't include someone walking towards her at that point. We can only see it from her perspective, not from our perspective as the viewer. So what she's looking at, we don't see anything, and that's amazing. And to top it off, we get that nasty look at the end of that scene with her just lying on the beach and her leg in a position where you just wouldn't want it to be. And at number 8 is Dawn of the Dead from 2004. Now, when you watch Dawn of the Dead from 1978, the opening scene was great. For its time, it was fantastic, but when you watch it back, you go, it's pretty good. But when you look at the opening to Dawn of the Dead, it's so fast-paced, and the film is almost 20 years old now, and it still looks like a really good modern opening to a horror film that was just made recently. So I think the beginning of the film stands up. Not only does it stand up in terms of action and pace, it's also quite terrifying as well. When you see that little next door neighbour girl just coming into their bedroom, opening the door slightly, you're like, what on earth's happening here? And then obviously she attacks the husband, and Sarah Polley, she gets away, and just getting out into the street and seeing everybody being attacked, everyone's been affected by this at the same time. It's just non-stop. It's a lot fast-paced, a lot more fast-paced than a lot of zombie films that we got from back in 2004 and previous to that. So it was probably the first introduction, especially the American introduction, to the fast-paced zombies. Yes, we got it in 28 Days Later, but this one was more fast-paced, in my opinion. And at number 7 is A Quiet Place. Now, most of us saw the trailer for A Quiet Place and had an idea of what was going to happen in the film with the youngest son being taken at the beginning of the film. That's the idea that I got at the beginning of the movie when I saw the trailer, and I didn't think it was going to play out the way it did. Now, obviously, we knew it was a quiet movie, nobody was allowed to speak in the film, and it looks like there might have been a tragedy with the little kid, but I didn't expect that to be at the beginning of the film the way it did play out. I genuinely thought he was going to get taken and they tried to rescue him throughout the movie, but when we saw the little boy getting killed at the beginning, with everything that happened and how it played out, I was completely blown away. Even those first couple of minutes of the film, we get to know the family, every single family member. We felt for them straight away, even though we were 2-3 minutes into the movie. So when that little kid got taken, we knew everybody was going to feel guilty in a way. The mum felt guilty because she could have held her son. The little sister felt guilty because she could have just left that little plane and not give it to him. There's so many scenarios that played out in each of their heads in the build up and the lead up to that little boy getting killed at the beginning. So impactful. And then number 6 is Ghost Ship. Now I've only seen this movie a few times, and for those of you who have only seen it a few times like me, the most memorable scene in the entire film has to be the beginning, the way that everybody was killed on that ship as a pure accident, with that wire going through every single one of them, that little girl being the only person to survive. It was absolutely haunting, and obviously that builds up to the lead up to the ghost ship itself and the film with all the ghosts in it. I just think the build up was absolutely amazing. I wasn't expecting that to happen. A complete accidental massacre. And I think what makes this even better is, for those of you who know me, I'm a fan of the 50s and 60s style kind of music, and you hear that song playing at the beginning of the film. It's quite haunting in itself, but when you add in something like that at the beginning of the movie with the song, absolutely amazing. And then number 5 is Halloween from 1978. I think over 45 years on, the beginning is quite saturated now. I think because you know what's going to happen and there's 10, 11, 12 sequels after that, then the opening to Halloween doesn't seem so great. But if you look at Halloween on its own, picture it as if it never had any sequels. Picture it as if you're watching it for the first time and you didn't know anything about it. And you see it from a point of view angle of someone getting into the house and killing the girl at the beginning of the movie, only to come downstairs and to be revealed to be a 6-year-old child. Not only just it's just a 6-year-old child, which is scary enough, it was his big sister that he killed at the beginning of the movie, and had a blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes, just like Dr. Loomis said. So everything that happened in the play up and the lead up to what happened at the beginning of Halloween is absolutely haunting. And if we'd never seen anything like that before and watched it in a modern movie, we would be gobsmacked, because we would automatically expect it to be either a teenager or a burglar, someone that she didn't know. And the fact that it is someone that she knows, it's her little brother, and he's 6 years old, and he had no emotion at the very end of that scene where the parents took the mask off him. They're like, Michael? And he's just standing there with a blank, pale, emotionless face. So it might not stand the test of time for those who have seen it time and time again, but when you think about it, you're like, do you know what? That is a very, very powerful opening scene. And then number 4 is Final Destination from 2000. It's quite similar to Halloween in the sense that it was the first of its kind, and if you watched it for the first time today, not knowing what it was about, and you see that first scene when Alex and his friends board the plane and then they get off and the plane blows up because they had that premonition, you're like, wow, what a lucky escape that guy had. And I felt like that. Wow, when I watched the movie, I only seen a trailer for it on, I think it was Apple QuickTime at the time. It's like a 144 pixel quality, and it intrigued me. And then when I watched the movie, I was completely blown away by it. Yes, it gets oversaturated over time because I've seen it time and time again, and you see the sequels play out the same way as the original did. But when you look at the original in its own merit, it was surprising. You didn't know what was going to happen, and you get to know all these characters who get off the plane, so that when they survive and death comes after them, you already feel for them because they've just survived a plane crash. Obviously, they weren't part of the plane crash, but they just got off a plane and they didn't have to get off, but they did. And because they got off, they survived a plane crash. That's scary in itself because that can happen in real life. But to see it the way it played out in the film, it's haunting. And then number 3 is Friday the 13th from 2009. Now, this film gets a lot of stick, and I don't know why. To this day, almost 15 years later, I don't know why this movie gets the stick that it does. When I watched the remake in the cinema, the first 15 or so minutes, I thought these characters that we were built up to see were going to be the main characters in the movie. I don't know why I thought that, but I thought that they were going to be the main characters in this film, and they were all getting picked off one by Jason in a completely crazy manner. And then it gets to the end of that sequence where you see Jason running towards the girl with the machete, and then he slams it down, and then it cuts to Friday the 13th. I was like, whoa, I completely forgot this was still the opening scene to the movie. And then when I'd done that, I was like, that's the opening scene? Jesus. And then obviously it played out after that as the rest of the movie with new characters. But looking back on that, I was like, I think it might have been about 13 minutes, surprisingly. The first 13 or so minutes of the movie, I was like, this is great. You know, we're getting a kill every 2 or 3 minutes here. And it's gruesome, it's great, it's callbacks to previous Friday the 13th movies as well, all rolled up into an opening sequence. I was like, what have people got to complain about for this movie? Yes, the next part of the film is not as good as the opening, but it's not far off. And then number 2 is Urban Legend. I know that some people don't really like Urban Legend as a film, and I can understand why people don't like it, because it came out in the late 90s, and any movie that came out after Scream is just a copy of Scream. And yeah, I would say I would agree with that for most of the films that came out, but not for Urban Legend. Yes, it had that slasher spin, it had the whodunit aspect to it, and it had teenagers or early 20s in college. So it had all the elements to what you would consider a Scream knockoff. But it had something unique about it. I had a killer who was killing people in the vein of Urban Legends, and that was quite unique. But when you get the opening scene, even though you know it's about Urban Legends, I didn't know all the urban legends that were out there. So I didn't know that the backseat killer, for example, was an urban legend. So when this girl was going to the gas station and she was getting gas from this guy, Brad Dourif, Michael Mancini, I thought, is he after her? Because they're making it quite obvious that he's trying to kill her. And because it looked like he was trying to kill her, I was like, okay, he's going to try and kill her. He's going to get killed by maybe the killer, and then we'll get into the movie. But that didn't happen. He was just trying to warn her that somebody was in the back seat. Someone's in the back seat! After he said that, I got chills down my spine. I was only 14, 15 at the time. I got chills down my spine, and when I see the person in the backseat rising up with that axe, I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. I also never listened to Total Eclipse of the Heart in the Car anymore, thanks to Urban Legend. And then number 1 is Scream from 1996. It would have been very easy for me to include most of the Scream films on this and most of the Final Destination movies on this list, because the openings to those films are quite memorable themselves, but I thought I would only include one of each because I don't think they all deserve to be on there. So Scream has to be for me the greatest opening in horror movie history, and because I seen this movie for the first time in 1996 or 1997, didn't know anything about it, didn't know what it was about, didn't know what I was about to see, and this was genuinely the first movie I watched with a big star, probably the most well-known star that I've seen in the film, to die at the beginning of the movie. I just didn't see it coming. It's obvious now that that happens because we've seen it time and time again. And with the sequels, you'll get big stars getting killed at the beginning of the movie. Not just with Scream, but with other franchises. But Scream was the first one that put that idea on the map. I'm not saying it's the very first film to do it, but it's the first one that put that idea on the map and run with it. And it began a trend of what they'd done at the beginning of Scream. But not only that, I had Drew Barrymore at the beginning dying, which was crazy enough, but having a killer in the vein of knowing a lot about horror films, they're putting themselves into our position, which is quite weird because we weren't really rooting for the killer, but we were rooting for what the killer was about to say to its victims, because we wanted to answer that call because we're horror fans. We wanted to be called by Ghostface for some reason and go through that movie trivia, whether we lived or died. We wanted to go through that movie trivia, and it's thinking outside the box by Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson, of course, because it's something that I'd never seen before, that meta idea. I know that we got Wes Craven's New Nightmare a couple of years before that, but this was different because this movie was set in the movie world, whereas New Nightmare was set outside the movie world in real life. So they took the idea from New Nightmare and put it back into that movie world, and wow, what an opening from Scream.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
So that's my top 10 horror openings of all time. Yes, there's a lot more openings out there that maybe you would consider as being part of the top 10. There might be a top 10, and I say this all the time, there might be a movie that should be in the top 10 that isn't, that I just haven't seen before, or I've completely forgotten about. You know, I'm getting older now, I'm 40 years old. Maybe there's a horror film out there that I have seen that I loved the opening to, but I've completely forgotten about. But these are the top 10 memorable ones for me that I always remember, because I absolutely love every opening to these movies. There's a few out there that I wanted to squeeze in there, but I just couldn't do it. But for me, right now, this is my top 10. But what about you guys? Do you agree with my top 10? And if you don't, it's absolutely fine. Leave your top 10 down below. Before I go though, I will give you two honourable mentions that I think might get included in your list. And rest assured, I was thinking about them all the time. One was the opening to The Faculty, which I absolutely love. And the other one is the opening to An American Werewolf in London, because that opening was absolutely frightening to me growing up, but I just couldn't put it in there. I would say that that one is probably my number 11. But let me know your list down below, guys. Did they differ from me completely? As always, thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you soon.
Meeting adjourned.
I'll be right back.
What are you waiting for, huh?
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Ever played Skin the Cat?
Someone's in the